All right,
Cool.
we're rolling.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's Absolute Spirit here, and today we are going to be talking about our personal journeys in life and in philosophy and art for me, probably, and more stuff. Yeah, how we got here. Today we are in my studio space at school. So, as a part of being an art student in my senior year, I get a senior studio space, which is super cool. And we have this really nice couch. And so, yeah, that's where we are today. And yeah, do you want to get started with your. How did you get here, Matt?
Yeah. I guess I'll start by plugging another video that's either out or going to be out soon on our channel. It's called "How Immanuel Kant Saved My Life." A lot of what I will say will probably either be like a quick kind of recap of that or like very related to it, because that's how I at least decided I wanted to like dedicate myself to philosophy, like formally, like in an institution. And well, I wasn't even set on that yet, but that really opened me up to it. And like I was a little lost between disciplines before, um, so I guess I'll actually use this as like a line to get into how I got philosophy. So growing up, I always kind of questioned why things are the way they are. I was a very confused child, and mom might be watching this, so she could probably attest to that. I was a difficult child because of that. Not necessarily bad all the time. Every kid has their ups and downs, I think, but I definitely was harder than maybe the average kid. Not only just for my parents, but for my teachers. Like I was always talking, and I was always asking why. At least for like the beginning stage of my life. Um, and then in middle school, I sort of became hyper aware because I think a lot of the reason why I was asking why a lot when I was younger is because I kind of like had my head in the sand, so to speak. Um, I am somewhere on the autism spectrum. It used to be called Asperger's. Now it's probably just somewhere on that. And not that that matters like too much, but I think that explains maybe the head in the sand and kind of like very focused. I just kind of like live day to day, failed to kind of take into account the world as a greater whole. So everything seems so separate, connected, and things therefore lacked reason in my mind. Things just kind of happened because I was like isolating them. And especially with the philosophy I abide by now, this is not how reality works. It's not separated. It's I'm a monist, so I think it's all one, but which explains why things are the way they are and everything affects each other. But I very clearly did not understand that as a child, so I was always asking why. And then around middle school, which for me was seventh grade because of how my school district worked, I became very hyper aware of the world and things going on in it, and horrible things like war and death, and more people were dying in my life. My grandfather on my dad's side had passed away in I think October of 2016, which was 8 years ago now. The time of this recording is just kind of crazy. I think the same year or around the same time, my dog, who I had been with me since I was born, also passed away. So I was going through lots of grief, and I was overstimulated by just the amount of stuff happening in the world that I really, truly became like cognizant of, maybe it's the word, just aware of, really acknowledging it for what it was, for a lot of it for the first time. Because you always hear stuff and you ask your parents, "Mom, what's this? Mom, what's that?" And they're always like, "Oh, don't worry about it. You'll understand when you're older." I became older, and I really started understanding like way too quickly for me to comprehend. So I entered, I think was probably my first episode of like long depression. This has come back a few times in my life, probably two or three times. I took a psychopathology, like I was in a psychopathology lab over the summer that I got paid for, and this really made me reflect on my like episodes of depression. And this is definitely like the first one that like really hit me, where I was like actively considering like death as opposed to life as like a good thing, like wanting to just die. I was never really like suicidal per se, and like I want to like be the one to end my own life, but I was like it was probably better if I just weren't here. And I was like, I remember being like an antinatalist too in 7th grade. Like the memories kind of coming back. I was like, we should stop reproducing. We're horrible.
no.
We
Yeah.
arrive on Earth. We kill it more. We die. For the people who are into philosophy now, and when I learned about Schopenhauer, it's funny because this is all very like Schopenhauer sounding, like very pessimist. Not for the same reasons at all. Schopenhauer has much better reasons for thinking. I don't agree with it, but at least his reasoning was better than I was. It was just kind of a very emotional reaction, I think, to just the overwhelming amount of pain and suffering and death in the world. So that became very confusing. But that yearning for an answer never really left me. And so around the end of middle school, I remember one of the first things that broke my depression of all this, like, which is funny because this is all like very practical, like concrete stuff. And the thing that I remember feeling I felt hope for the first time in my life, maybe in years. I think I was in like 8th or 9th grade, and I watched this video. I forget who it's by. It's in like my YouTube save. It's called "Is the Universe a Hologram?" and it features physicist Leonard Susskind, and he explained that our whole reality might just be like information, like abstract, sort of like theoretical. I'm not in physics anymore, so I don't remember like a lot of this or how to explain information. But it's like quasi-physical like thing, just projected onto the physical universe. If someone's familiar with projection theory, you just look at projection theory, you'll get a much better explanation than what I'm giving you now. But I got really into projection theory, and I was like, oh shit, I want to figure out what reality is. Like this seems like a way out. If I understand what reality is, maybe like things will get better. I don't even think I was consciously aware of that like possibility. I think I just for some reason I saw a way out with these questions. So I got into physics. I was very much like anti-school. School seemed very like a forced, authoritative environment, which it is, at least how it is now, public school. I'm definitely not like an advocate for it, but at least I saw like, okay, well if I'm gonna do physics, here school's an opportunity to like get into college and do physics. So got really into school, which showed me how much I really could do if I put my mind to it. I hadn't really been putting my mind to too many things other than like processing things and being depressed.
Yeah, that's can relate.
Yeah, so for the first time in my life, I like, well, not my life, but to this extent, for the first time in my life, had really put my mind on a goal as like a growing like young adult, basically, like teenager, young adult, turning into young adult. At least at that point, I was like between the ages of 14 to 16. I was really like grinding, and 17 really too. I was really grinding at school. I got into like AP classes by the time I had finished high school. I was really into physics. And then towards senior year, I kind of changed because as I was reading physics and learning more physics and getting into AP physics, I had also gotten into more math. And by getting exposed to math, I had entered these conversations. I was also getting really into 4chan, which
Oh no. Oh no.
God, I don't know. This is going to sound bad. Maybe it'll sound bad. Hopefully. 4chan had a really positive impact on my life. Not politically, not politically. I went on the science board /sci. I don't know if anyone on here is familiar with that. Basically people just talking about like physics and math and why they're pursuing it, the philosophical implications of it. The culture was still very like toxic in retrospect. Because I think they were using the physics and the math as like a facade just for like intelligence, because they like overly valued that in their own lives, and they like judged how like worthy they were and like how much of a person you are, I guess, by intelligence. So it was still very toxic, but I bought into that to some extent, and so worked really hard to become really good at math and physics. But aside from like the intelligence conversation, another like philosophical debate that was happening on that science board on 4chan was about math versus physics. There were mathematicians on that board and there were physicists on that board. And the mathematicians argued that they were better than the physicists because they understood pure mathematics. And people were all about purity on this board, or not everyone, but a lot of them. And how smart you were and how much of a person you were and how much of reality you understood and how much meaning reality had all kind of depended on this purity. So And purity in this sense just means like abstract reasoning, like mathematics, and then in philosophy we would identify as metaphysics, maybe like epistemology, just very theoretical physics. These very abstract sciences that don't have to do with this dirty corporeal world, and a lot of it has to do with contingency, because people were not fans of contingency. They weren't using this conceptual framework, by the way. This is all me in retrospect, like putting the philosophical framework. But now that I can identify their like metaphysical stances, but they were definitely like rationalist kind of people that thought knowledge really came from the pure sciences, namely mathematics and logic. So I got into mathematics and logic. Longer story short of that section of this long story, I became a Pythagorean mystic and believed in a Platonic kind of person, Platonist maybe, Neoplatonist of some sort, where I believed that mathematics held the answers, and there was this like heavenly realm that like we had access to through our intellect. So like very Platonist, very Plato, very like ancient Greek rationalist kind of conception of reality, where I became way less interested in physics and more into pure mathematics. And then that's kind of where I was entering college. Funny little detour really quickly. Around that same time, I was into purity and all this pure stuff, and I took a trip to Barnes & Noble one night with my family, and I went to the philosophy section, because philosophy and math, I went to math, philosophy, because I was more like pure, right? I just wanted to read pure stuff, and I found a work by Kant called Critique of Pure Reason, and so I bought it, and I was like, oh, this is like a critique of purity. I want to understand this. I had seen it posted a few places on the internet, and I tried to read it. This was like, I think later my junior year of high school, and I could not comprehend it. But I had it, and I held on to it. And so years later, I went to it in college. So I entered college as a Pythagorean mystic, and in my first semester, not too long, if you're into this channel in Absolute Spirit, you might have watched our episode on the Cartesian, our first video on the Cartesian demon. I got hit with the Cartesian demon, and all my wonderful purity, like Platonic, Pythagorean, Platonian, like philosophy totally fell apart. I was like, fuck, and excuse my French. We're not really monetized, so I don't think that matters.
Nah.
Anyway, so it all came crashing down, and so I just started reading through the Western canon of philosophy, starting with Descartes, Locke, Hume. Eventually, I found my way back to Kant, but this time it was in my second semester of college, which is actually here where we're at now. Just another cool shout out to this wonderful campus, Tree University.
Not the second semester, just the college.
Yeah. But shout out to that second semester too, because that's when I encountered Kant again, and my life was changed. And that's kind of where you can insert into this part of this grand story I'm telling in this video, how Immanuel Kant saved my life. That's kind of where that happened, and ever since then, my life was totally changed. The theory of the transcendental unity of perception rocked my world. I was on the verge of tears learning about it, which is like the most nerdy, like autistic German idealist thing you could probably ever conceive of, crying about learning about the unity of perception. Because that's really what I was after. The whole time I was really after kind of what is reality, what is my place in it. Not that these were really super I wasn't consciously aware of these questions, but I guess unconsciously I wanted to know this. And consciously, I just found these thinkers and theories and ideas that were really interesting, starting from Leonard Susskind and theoretical physics to Kant and German idealism. And then through there, I found Zizek and psychoanalysis, and I was just thrust into this new world and this new way of looking at it that totally redefined everything in terms of meaning. And, I started focusing on the present more. I became newly Christian. I was very confused about religion. Religion was a huge thing in my upbringing. I was raised Roman Catholic too, which is probably an important thing I should have said earlier, but that was an important detail too. So I was just this lost Catholic kid, confused as hell, trying to understand what is going on in the world. And I totally revitalized my religious faith and my views on spirituality. I'm big into Hegel now and Zizek, so if you want to know what my views are on them, you can watch other videos and other dialogues and explainers. A lot of that has to do with what I believe now, and it's just totally changed my world. I guess if I had to sum it up with a few things, that popular points that people might care about, definitely believe that like the present is the most like important time out of all time that you're living in. Always,
Be here now.
yeah, be here now,
Yeah.
but always be cognizant of the future and the past, and
Mm.
realize how your actions now will impact have been impacted by the past and will impact the future. Um, and really, there's so many things to say. I don't know. The reality as a whole. Um, Look at every aspect of your life that you can. Ask how it's affecting you. Look into your unconscious. Look into your unconscious. Don't ignore that. That's important and forms who you are, at least of how you conceive yourself, and really look into how it might be affecting you. And if you don't look into your unconscious, really bad things can happen in the future where it will manifest and come out in horrible ways. So
So
really
true.
attune to yourself, attune to other people, really try to be empathetic. Um, and if you want to learn about why these are the conclusions, that's a lot of what this channel exists for. Absolute Spirit. I want to put absolute spirit into the world so people can understand why these things are important. But I just wanted to list a few like bullet point lessons I gained from this big, long, kind of disconnected but hopefully sensible story. And I really tried to put the personal emphasis on it. So that's me. 16 minutes later. Sorry that was long, but hopefully that was meaningful and important. I guess it's your turn.
Yes. So thank you for your personal story and sharing. So yeah, my life and journey is quite. I don't know if I've really talked about it, at least since childhood. I've talked about like my recent life and my recent like journey and stuff to people before, but I don't know if I've ever given like a rundown of like how I got here and how I started really. So yes,
New lore.
yes, new lore.
New lore
um,
drop, guys. Wake up, babe. New lore. Anyway, I'm sorry.
no, no, you're so good. So when I was young, how I understood the world, how I experienced the world was through books. I read so much. I read a lot of like fantasy and just general fiction and like I think there was a shelf at my like public library and it was called like the tween shelf or something like
I
that.
remember the Twin Shelf. I like that.
And it was just like it was like a helpful genre thing because a lot of the stuff in there was interesting to me and like I read like almost like everything in the shelf. Like I remember I would go and I'd be like, well, there's nothing here. I can't pick from the shelf anymore because I've read it all. I was just such a voracious reader, and um, in retrospect, I was definitely reading and like associating with female characters and like living my life through that perspective, but I had no cognizance of that outside of the books. Like I would read and I would really lose myself because I had a lot of just kind of difficult family stuff going on, a lot of weird interpersonal relationships at home, a lot of just uncomfortable kind of life and like depressing life in a lot of ways. And so I would just escape into books and I would live in books. And also like I didn't want to be in my body, which again, like not cognizantly, at least actually I don't know how cognizant I was as a child because but that's a whole nother thing. I mean, I guess it's like mildly worth mentioning here that like I would like identify myself to like other children as like a tomboy. Like I just like I like didn't know that like I like wasn't in a female body. Like I there's a disconnect there. But then I guess eventually I figured it out and like really like repressed myself, you know, because it's weird. I have like some memories of being like open about it, but then like once like middle school started to roll around, well, when middle school started to roll around, I had stopped reading a lot. I wasn't like completely done, but I had just really slowed down, and I don't remember exactly why I stopped, but I just did. But when I was reading, um, the way I describe it is I was kind of like tripping. I had like a really, really, really vivid imagination, and I would really like be in those books, and I would live through those books, and I would, I felt like this like world traveler, and I was just this like small little kid, and I was honestly like pretty like wise and intelligent, and like I like to think a lot of that is still there, but I also think I lost a lot of it due to like social conditioning and like becoming like a, you know, um, yeah, like a socialized like adolescent and dealing with like other people and adults and things like that. And obviously it's still there at my core, but it's something that I feel like I kind of need to rediscover as opposed to something that's like present all the time. Um, and so yeah, I stopped reading as much, and I started engaging in more of like the traditional like things. I was really depressed. I was really depressed from the age of like, I don't know, third or fourth or fifth grade, like somewhere around there, like very young. Like I remember like coming home one day and like my mom was like, "How was school?" And I was like, "It was bad." She was like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm horrible. Like I'm so sad, and I don't know why. Like I don't know what's going on, and I can't figure it out." I spent so much time in this program called Aftercare. I went to Catholic school, by the way. Side note, for most of my life, I went to public school for a little while, and then I switched to Catholic school. And yeah, I was very depressed. I don't know if this was before or after. Probably after, I would assume. But I remember when I first got there, when I first got to this new school, or not even when I first got there, but like a little later, maybe like I got there in third grade, and maybe in like fourth or fifth grade, I started, um, like my name at the time. I like made like an alternate name of it that was a more like feminine version, and I would like sit on like the boys and the girls side of the table because there was that existed at the time. We were very divided by gender in my class, and so I would like hop back and forth, and I would switch between these different like identities essentially, and I would say like, oh, I'm this person now and I'm this person now, and people kind of went along with it and were like, okay, sure, because kids are kind of like, okay, sure. But then as we got older, it was more like, wait, what what's happening there? Like, there was like a weirdness, and like it became like taboo, and it was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, because people thought it was kind of just a joke, I guess. And so that's how I played it off. I was like, oh yeah, that was funny. Like, and my guess would be that it was around that time where I started to get depressed, around that time where I started really repressing that side of myself. And I spent a long amounts of time since since the start, since I was first at that school in this program called Aftercare. And Aftercare was basically like if your parents couldn't come and pick you up from school because they were at work, you would stay at Aftercare. So school ended at 2 p.m. and I'd be in Aftercare until like 5 or 6. So it was like 3 or 4 hours, which I mean, is a long time generally, but was especially long for like a young kid. Like 3 or 4 hours of like being in a space with this old woman who's smoking cigarettes and like, just like it was wild. It was wild, and her voice too. She like sounded like a chain smoker, and she was like, I don't want to say abusive, but like borderline. Like all the kids like feared her. Basically, like she had this like I mean, she liked me. She liked me. She was always like, "Oh, you're like one of the good ones," and I was like, "Please don't put me in that position. That's hella uncomfortable.
Yeah,
like,
that's
it's
such a
so gross."
problematic phrase.
Yeah. Also,
Aside.
there was like this younger woman assistant who came in. She was like 25, and I mean, she was really cool. I liked her a lot, but like in retrospect, the relationship that she had with us was so because like she would talk to us about her like personal life, and she would tell us about her like sexual issues and like marital problems, and like she'd be like, oh yeah, my stepmom doesn't want her kid anymore, and so now I have another kid in my house. And she was just like
Pretty,
she would just
pretty
like
intense
drop
for
this shit to
Catholic
like
school students.
yeah, for any like sixth grader, I think. Like, and there would be like me and my friends, and we'd be sitting around and be like, oh, we're cool. Like this is an older person, she's telling us about her life because we're cool, you know.
You have like the insider access.
Yeah. And so like yeah, there was that. So overall, just kind of a weird space to be in, like the Catholic school as well. Like just so much repression going on, so much like, like really strict like things like gender, really strict things like just how to be, like you can't express, you can't do in certain ways, and we all found ways around that. I mean, we had like a cult. We had a cult of sorts. We would at recess in my 8th grade year. I had the same class for all the time I was there. It was just like 20 of us in the entire like grade, and so we moved. Like we would all go to classes together. We would all Like it was different from a public school where you're kind of just like there's like a million people in your grade. Um, but at recess we would go, and there was this grate in the middle of the field, and we would go and we would stand at the grate and we would throw things down there. We would like sacrifice to it, and we would like worship it, and we would also have like rituals of like who could endure the most pain. So like we would like snap a rubber band against our finger.
Oh, I remember doing stuff like that too.
Yeah, and like it was it was odd. We had a like economy based on like pens and pencils, and like you would like steal each other's pens and like trade them. So that's where I started, and I was very depressed throughout that entire time. And I didn't really know the word depression. I didn't know how to put it into context, but I knew I didn't really want to be alive. I knew I didn't like being alive. I knew like being alive was painful and kind of gross, and like that I didn't know how to deal with other people. I got made fun of a lot, but like also I was sort of like, I mean, there were 20 of us, so like there was the weirdest politics. Like it was so strange, like the class groups and stuff like that. Like it was bizarre. Like why is this like a hierarchy and a political structure? And there were cliques, even though there's 20 of us. So there was like three groups of people. I don't know. Anyway, there was a lot of middle schooler drama, and it was just a really like generally depressing place to be. And then I got out of there and I went to high school, where things got kind of more intense in a way. Like it was different. My freshman year of high school was pretty just nice. It was like enjoyable. It was also Catholic school, but way less strict. It wasn't nearly as associated with the church. It was kind of just like a school that happened to be Catholic, as opposed to like a Catholic school, which the one I was at when I was younger was. Yeah, my freshman year was really nice. It was one of the first times in my life where I felt kind of generally happy, and I wasn't like thrilled. I wasn't like anywhere near the level of happiness I've achieved now and in college, but I was happier than I had been in a while, and I was content, and things were nice and chill. And then sophomore year happened, and like a ton of like interpersonal stuff started happening, and some really intense things with friends and personal people, like a lot of like people trying to kill themselves and people cutting themselves and people getting sexually assaulted, and me being this kind of like group therapist for like everyone in my life and individual therapist, and you know yeah, it was a difficult time. And then I got to junior year, and junior year I just like I didn't really have any friends left. Everyone, like most of the people I was good friends with, had transferred, and I kind of just would like be depressed and miserable. And by this point in my life, I was just like kind of longing for death. Like I was just like I just didn't have much to live for, honestly. Like I was unhappy. I mean, like I had track and cross country, which were fun, but my coach had left. I had this really inspirational coach in my first 2 years of high school, and then he got pushed out by the school because the administration was lame, and so I even lost interest in that, which was something that had like kept me going earlier. And then COVID hit, and I was like, cool, I don't have to go to school. But then COVID hit, and I'm sure for a lot of you, if you were in school during COVID, you can understand this. Like, there was that weird period of like a week or two where it was like, oh, cool, we're off for school, but then it's like, oh wait, everything is different now. Like I have to be home with my family, and we have to interact with one another 24/7, and that was kind of horrific. And so I went to Vermont. I left. I live in New Jersey, for context.
Did you go, or like your whole family? Like...
No, just me. So my parents, it was just me and my parents in the house at the time. My siblings are older and, live other places. And so I went to Vermont to stay with my aunt and my cousin. And that summer, like that, and at the end of the spring, my junior year, when I went to stay with my aunt and my cousin, it was really wonderful. It was just so like wholesome, and it was such like, honestly, I remember that as like probably the best period of time in my life, up until that point. But then I went back to home, and I was in Vermont for about a month, and then I went back to home, and like then it was summer and school was over, and because school was virtual for the rest of my junior year, so it was summer and I got a job at Taco Bell, and that summer was pretty like mild. But then the next school year hit, and about 2 months into the school year, I went back to Vermont, and I stayed in Vermont for about 3 months. And that time was different. It wasn't so wholesome. It wasn't that like I still had a positive relationship with my aunt and my cousin, but it was just like they had lives and I was home and I had nothing. I had no one. I didn't really have any friends left. Like me and like my close friends at the time, there were only like one or two, but we had gotten into like a pretty serious and severe like fight, and so that person was pretty much out of my life at the time, and I was horribly depressed. I was miserable. I was completely disassociated from reality. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was real. I didn't know what was happening. I was just like, I would go for walks late at night, and I would listen to Brockhampton and play Zelda. Zelda, actually, Breath of the Wild, that was a respite from all of this. But yeah, and I was also reading some darker stuff. I was reading some Stephen King, and it was sort of like a return to the childhood sort of mentality, like tripping through books, but like in a much darker way, in a way that was not like, I mean, it was helpful, but like, so it was just this period of time that I had to myself, that I had to be in real deep isolation, and it was, in retrospect, very meditative, but I didn't think of it that way at the time because I wasn't into meditation at that time. And so, yeah, it was dark. It was really difficult. It was long and lonely and desolate. And then I got through it. Yeah, I got through it, and I like survived, and I was okay. And I went home around like the end of the year. I remember I went back to school for a few days because I had been totally virtual the whole year, and I went back to school for a few days, and it was just like bizarre. It was like, who are these people?
Was it like empty too?
No, it was actually like somewhat full. It was just like I was completely gone. Like I was no longer a part of the culture at all. Like it was completely like, people didn't dislike me at all. People were happy to see me, but just like it was, there was nothing for me there anymore, you know. And there was already not a lot there to begin with. But yeah, high school overall was not enjoyable for me, and neither was middle school. Both were really difficult, and I was really depressed. And so I got to college. Hey everyone, sorry for the pretty abrupt cut, but this video got super long. We went for like 2 hours, so it's gonna be a 3 or maybe 4-parter. Yeah, so that's it for this week. We're ending on kind of the transition from high school to college, and next week's video, I think, will probably be focused more on college and more stuff. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. We love you, and see you next week. Goodbye.